Hey guys, this is Melissa Bachman. Are you ready to stop spooking deer before it's even time to hunt them? Then you need the new Flex S Dark cellular trail camera from SpyPoint. With a no-glow flash option, long-lasting solar power, and a ton of settings that can be changed anytime through the SpyPoint app, there are no more excuses for letting your deer get wise before the season even starts. So check it out for yourself and see why the SpyPoint Flex S Dark is the unstoppable and undetectable scouting tool you need for your next hunt.
Bow hunting all comes down to a moment. And in the moment, you want equipment on your bow that will get the job done. Trophy Ridge products are the tools bow hunters trust. React technology sights, rests, stabilizers, and quivers to help a bow hunter be successful in the field. And those tools are from Trophy Ridge.
Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of castingacross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. It's episode 360, so if you wanted to, you could assign an episode of the podcast to every degree of the compass. We're not doing that today. We are getting to your questions, your comments, your accusations. And before I do that, I want to say thank you for all of the feedback I get over the course of the weeks and months and years. I appreciate it, and as I've said before, whether your comments make it to this podcast episode or not, I do my best to reply as soon as I can. It's the least I can do for you listening to me. It's one thing for me to talk, it's another thing for you to listen. So today I want to get to two very fly fishing focused questions, and one that is kind of a bigger picture comment that I got a lot of over the last few months, so it definitely deserves attention on the podcast, even though it's a little bit of fly fishing adjacent talk, but I think you're probably used to that here. But before we get to that, let's dive right in. Matthew, thanks as always for your articles and podcasts. I have a historical and tactical question that may be suitable for your fly fishing accusations episode. Hey, this guy got it. He was listening. I say, ask me questions. He did. How were nymphs fished before the development of strike indicators, Eurostyler nymphing, the monorig, etc.? Was it just a matter of swinging wet flies? I ask because I'm not fond of indicator nymphing, I'm not interested in Euro nymphing, and would like to try something other than a dry dropper. Thanks, and any thoughts or insights would be greatly appreciated. God bless, Jeff. Well, Jeff, you raise an interesting question, and one that I don't think we talk about enough. So let's define terms a little bit. So when we talk about nymphing, we are using a fly that imitates a period in an insect's development when it is underwater, particularly these aquatic macroinvertebrates that we are dealing with. So it is going to be a situation where it's not flying around. It is either emerging from some sort of egg, or it is actually emerging from its living on the surface of the stream bottom up to the surface of the water, and its wings are going to be coming out soon. But it's anything that's kind of in that stage, and then there's other critters that we kind of throw into that category as well, whether it be crest bugs or any other bugs like that are living in the water, under the water. So we have to fish these when we can't see them. And that's why we have all the tactics and approaches that Jeff mentioned in his email. Now, I would say the most popular one by far is a strike indicator, which is a bobber. Now, it does other things, right? A strike indicator is helpful because it helps you see where your nymph is floating, or where your nymph has been sunk, and where it is in the stream in front of you. It also, and I think this is probably the most virtuous way to use a strike indicator, is that it sets the depth of your fly. So you can manipulate a fly based upon how much weight it has, but it's really quite simple to put a pretty heavy fly on and then throw a strike indicator on, and that's going to, with the rate of flow taken into account, it's going to keep that fly precisely where you want that fly to be in the water column, because the fish may be on the bottom, they may be kind of sitting somewhere in the middle, or they could be very, very close to the surface, and a strike indicator will accomplish that. Of course, you can use a dry dropper, like Jeff said, and this is a great way to fish because now you have two flies in the equation. Fish could, even if it's a very low percentage situation, come to the surface and take that big puffy dry fly that you are using effectively as a strike indicator. And fish will take strike indicators from time to time, but it's better to have hook on there. And so this does the same thing. You identify where your nymph is relative to where your fly is. And then if your fly goes underwater, it's the same thing with a strike indicator. You know, oh, I either have a branch or I have a fish. And you can also adjust where your fly is going to be in the water column. And then the third thing you mentioned is Euro-nymphing, which of course is a kind of a greater scheme of tactics. And it is primarily based upon having a tight line between your rod tip and that fly, a very direct connection. And that way, if the fish takes, then you feel that instantaneously. You have great control over not only where that fly is in the river, but also in the water column. And you're able to follow that fly for quite a while, oftentimes allowing for much longer drifts. But he doesn't want to do any of those, and that's fine, because there's another way to fish nymphs, and that is to just cast them out and follow them downstream. Now, this kind of nymph fishing doesn't get a lot of publicity because it's so simple. Now, to be fair, it's also a little bit more complicated in the sense that you don't have the same sort of assets, the same sort of augmentations, the same sort of tools and literally indicators that you have with the other methods of nymphing. But, effectively, all you do is cast that fly out, and a couple things matter here. One, you do want to have a good cast where that line unrolls, that leader unrolls, that tippet unrolls, and that nymph lands at the far extension of that cast. You don't want some sort of puddle or pile. You don't want some dog leg, either upstream or downstream, at the end of your cast. So you want to have a good cast. And then what you do is you mend and strip in enough lines so you do have a somewhat direct line between your rod tip and that fly. So effectively what we're doing here is we are having a long distance tight line nymphing. Now it's going to not be so tight in the same way that like a traditional Euro rig or even a mono rig is going to be, but you're going to have a tighter connection to that fly. And, you've got your fancy expensive fly rod and you have a fly line, which is relatively rigid in the sense that doesn't stretch a lot. And then you have delicate, sensitive monofilament or fluorocarbon at the end. You should be able to feel some ticks and some bumps, especially if they are strong. But like with an indicator, you have this great thing that is part of your setup, and that is the end of your fly line. The end of your fly line is one of the most effective indicators that you have that does a couple things for you. It shows you where that fly is, kind of like an indicator or a dry fly in a dry dropper rig would function. You make a good cast, and you have 9 feet of tippet out and leader and tippet out in front of your fly line. You can effectively think, okay, my fly is probably 9 feet out, but 4 feet down. So really, do that a squared, b squared, c squared thing. It's effectively somewhere in the 5 to 7 feet in front of where the end of that fly line is. And so you're watching that fly line move downstream, the end of that fly line where it connects to your leader. Now, I will say this is where having a good connection matters. If you have a big chunky knot, or you have a wonky line to leader connection with maybe bad loop to loop, this can actually create a kink in the setup. This is where having a good nail knot or some nicely tied loop-to-loop connections can really help you out, because then you have a really nice direct connection from your line to your leader to your fly. And so you just follow that downstream and you mend. If you start to notice that thing sagging one way or another, starting to move downstream and kind of create a bit of a positive curve or a negative curve, if your line has a belly and it's starting to pull that fly, you know that fly is moving unnaturally if that leader line connection is moving unnaturally. And you just follow that downstream, mending as needed, and stripping in any line gently, not enough that you're pulling that nymph from the bottom or from the water column wherever you have it, but moving it enough that you are taking in some slack and maintaining a tighter connection to that fly. So that's kind of the way that I learned how to nymph before striking a. I mean, I started using pulses pretty early in my fly fishing, but I think I started nymphing just casting out and just kind of following the end of my fly line and waiting for any subtle bumps, stops, or for bigger takes, you actually can feel it. It'll shoot out towards where that fly is and where it's being taken by a fish, or of course by a log or a stump. So that would be my suggestion, Jeff. It's definitely worth exploring, and there's some times where it's the better way to fish. There's situations where, especially if like the fish are holding really, really shallow, and you are maybe greasing your line and your leader and your tippet, but still using a nymph, having a strike indicator would spook those fish. You're effectively lining the fish with the strike indicator. If it's very glassy water, or if they're being selective, I mean, this is really how you fish emergers too. So it's kind of that you see the progression. It's not fishing a dry fly. It's not using one of the nymphing techniques that we alluded to earlier. It's something in between where you're still maintaining a nice tight drift, but you're allowing that nymph to just sit a few inches down in their water column, which is oftentimes the what fish are feeding on even more frequently when a quote unquote hatch is happening. So a lot of us are probably doing this without even knowing it, that we are fishing nymphs without leader augmentation, like dry fly for a dropper, strike indicator, or some sort of your rig. But anyway, awesome question. I got me thinking about it because it's just something I learned to do 20 plus years ago, and I really haven't articulated very much. And so that's been helpful for me. So thank you, Jeff, for that good question. The next one is, I think it's a legitimate accusation. It comes on the YouTube page, a comment for a video on nippers. He says, please, for the love of all that's good in the world, let's stop with the idea you need to make your lure look natural. I threw just a hook in yesterday and yanked a brown trout. Fish are dumb. They do dumb things. Smiley face emoji. Okay, so not 100% sure what's going on here, but I did mention in the video that one of the reasons why I like to have a nice pair of nippers, a nice pair that has a couple of features. One, good control, so decent size, not teeny tiny drugstore fingernail clippers, and then jaws that extend past the body of the nippers themselves, so I can apply force and do so in a way I can see, so that I can trim that tag end of that fly off with precision. So if I am fishing a streamer, I'm not going to do it with a lot of precision. If I am fishing, for example, a weedless frog, either the fly rod or the spinning rod, I'm going to actually leave more line hanging off. I think this is an important thing. You don't always go to find that teeny tiny little stub. If you clip your excess line, your tag end, too close to your knot, then you do run the risk of that thing actually sliding into the knot and then moving through your knot and then coming undone. Of course, if you leave too much on there, it becomes a little post where stuff gets stuck on it, especially if you're using thicker monofilament or fluorocarbon, and it is more rigid. It effectively becomes like a little catching sort of scum and muck. So what I'll do when I'm fishing in weeded situations for bass or for trout is I will leave, a good inch, allowing that thing to fold over. Because if I'm fishing in a situation like that, I really don't care if that inch of monofilament is sticking out. That's not what the bass is looking at. And if it is, it's going to be one more thing hanging in the water along with all the dangly legs that are either on my popper or on my rubber frog, or depending on if I'm fishing fly rod or if I'm fishing a spinning rod. So that's a reason why you can leave that on there. I know a lot of people do the same thing with certain other lures when there's junk in the water, whether it be a spinnerbait or whether it be a weedless worm, because you don't want a conehead weighted worm, if again fishing spinning gear, to then have this little trail of grass because you have this rigid little 1/4 inch bit of 12-pound test sticking out the side. So I would say the same thing holds true when it comes to streamers. So yeah, you don't need it. And honestly, if you are having success fishing however you're fishing and you're not staying tied, then by all means keep doing what you're doing. But that's just something to pay attention to. For my dry flies, I want to keep it nice and close. One of the reasons why I like keeping it nice and close with the dry fly is that I want that fly's profile to present naturally on the surface of the water. And if I am using like a size 16 dry fly, and I leave a tag end off of that knot that is anything more than just a little tiny nub, now that is going to influence the way that that fly hits the water. It kind of creates an angle. It creates a tripod even between with the wings and now this tag end. So if that is what was being commented on, I get it. But again, it only takes an extra second or something like that. I definitely don't get out my my ruler, my micrometer. Is that what a micrometer does? I don't know. And measure how long my tag ends are. But again, we're talking the difference between a pair of 75-cent drugstore fingernail clippers, or even just a $15 pair of nippers that have a hook eye cleaner in them, like and maybe a little bit of a grippy surface for you to hang on to. I fish nicer nippers than that, but I also carry cheap ones, and they will work a whole lot better, and they give me a little bit more precision. Again, it doesn't take that much time, but if you want to get bent out of shape about it, I'm not going to stop you. All right, as mentioned, the third topic is a little bit, again, fly fishing adjacent, and I actually have a handful of different emails that I could go to with this particular feedback, because like I said, over the last few months, I've gotten quite a few comments regarding the same topic. Pick one of the more recent ones. This is from Ryan. He says, "Hi, Matthew. I've been listening to the podcast and reading the articles for about a year and a half. Thank you. It's been fun to listen and read. I live in Northeast Wisconsin. Started fly fishing on panfish and bass. I've been trout fishing for about 20 years, mainly central and northern Wisconsin. Went back to the beginning and I'm working my way through all the episodes. Your voice was in my head a couple weeks ago. Well, better mine than someone else's that you haven't listened to, I guess. When I had a brook trout downstream, I had no way of moving without spooking it. Small stream, silty bottom, overhanging branches. I caught it by making sure I had enough line out and wiggling my rod tip to get more line out and a good drift. Thanks for that." You are welcome, Ryan. That's one of my favorite ways to fish small streams, and man, does it work. Downstream is not the normal approach, but, pragmatism has its place. All right, he continues on. This is what I want to touch on. He says, "I also appreciate you not shying away from your faith. As a Christian man, that hasn't always come easy for me. It's nice to see and hear." He then asked a question about wading boots, which I answered directly. I think I did a podcast on wading boots recently, so I'm not going to answer that here again on this episode. And he says, "Thanks again, Ryan." Well, Ryan, I am glad I was able to help you catch that fish in some small way. I'm sure your skill was the greatest part of the how it happened pie chart, and my contribution was just a little bit of sliver, but thank you anyway. But I did want to just touch on again what Ryan said about me not shying away from my faith. And yeah, I can't. I mean, it matters more than fly fishing. It's what makes fly fishing matter. I've talked about that before on the podcast. And I guess the thing that I just come back to is that I'm not going to use this platform to talk about my faith, about Scripture, about the gospel in a way that I think is incongruent to what casting across is. If you've met me in person and we've talked for any length of time, you probably know that I bought the domain Casting Across 10 years ago now, with the idea that if Casting Across fell apart for whatever reason, because the fly fishing stuff just wasn't working, now I had the domain that was Casting a Cross. Because that's something that I thought, you know what, I like having that kind of a hidden meaning in it from the get-go. And so I again, if you're a new listener, I'm a pastor of a independent church in southern New Hampshire. We're confessionally Reformed Baptist, and I am just so thankful that so many of the interactions I've had on Casting Across online and in person have been folks interacting with what is oftentimes implicit, but every once in a while explicit in the podcast or on the website, and that is the presuppositions that go into not only my writing, my podcasting, and my videos, but even just in the way I approach life. We all have a worldview. And I think, as I alluded to just only a matter of weeks ago, like, my worldview says that I'm different than the fish. The fish matter, but I matter more. I was created with an image that transcends a cold-blooded fish. More than, as I'm watching the trees kind of shed their colored leaves in my backyard now, they're wonderful, they're beautiful, they're inspiring, they're doing what they were made to do, but it doesn't hold a candle to what we as humans were created to do, and that is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. So I guess, first of all, thank you to Ryan and to all the other folks that have written about me making more explicit comments in the last few months. And I would say that if you're like, this is not what I came here for, and I have concerns or questions, let me know. First of all, you're not paying anything. Secondly, I want dialogue. That's one of the things I find just so discouraging in our culture, that tolerance is talked about, but it's not done. It's not dialogued. I would be happy to talk. If you are a Christian of a different stripe, if you are a Mormon, if you're a Roman Catholic, if you are an atheist, agnostic, if you worship the trout, then I think there's points of contact for us to have conversations about. And I'd be happy to engage in that on email, and I'm happy to talk on the phone. You just let me know. Matthew at Casting Across. I am always here. Well, I'm always somewhere. Oftentimes I do get back to my computer and I can see when people reach out to me. But anyway, just thought that was worth mentioning because there's been a lot of that feedback lately. All right, this week on Casting Across, the first article was another product review. It is Holding Aces with Reddington's Top Trout Reel. Holding Aces with Reddington's Top Trout Reel. So a few weeks ago, I reviewed the Reddington EDC, their newest fly rod offering. To be fair, they have a kind of a revamped Predator, heavy duty saltwater series, but that's kind of just an addition to an existing rod line. But the EDC is their newest rod, and the Ace is their newest reel. It replaces the Rise, which is a great little reel. This is a little bit more substantial, and it's a really, really good reel. And you can read the article over at Casting Across, but I make the argument that it strikes a good balance because it gives you, if you're a freshwater angler, kind of premium machined disc drag fly reel at a great price. There are a few drawbacks, but again, if you're a trout angler, it's not going to be a problem for you. So check out that review and what I mean by that. Wednesday's article was another book review on the website and on YouTube called Video, This Wonderful Book of Trout, in which I talk about Charles Fox's This Wonderful World of Trout. It's another great South Central PA book coming from a guy who is one of the regulars there on the Latort and some of those other spring creeks. And I'd say this is a classic on the Fly Fishers library. I'm a little biased towards East Coast books, but it's definitely worth checking out. You can get used copies for like 10 or 12 bucks. I mean, you'd be out of your mind to not do that if you consider yourself a fan of fly fishing literature. So you can watch that video either on my website or over on YouTube. This week's recommendation on the podcast is fly tying focused, which I know a lot of folks do year round, but we are getting closer at the time of this recording to the colder months. And, one of the reasons why I think people get frustrated with fly tying is their tools, specifically thread control, which doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But if you tie flies, you know how vital it is. I'm certainly not an advanced or expert fly tyer, but for the fly tying that I engage in, I know that having the proper thread tension and not messing or fussing with it matters, such that spending a few extra dollars on a bobbin is helpful. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes of this podcast over at castinghouse.com to a page that is a search within the Loon Outdoors website. And it is to all of their bobbin stuff, specifically 3 bobbins. They have 3 bobbins in their Ergo series, the all-purpose, the regular Ergo, and the Ergo dialed-in bobbin. Now, I personally use all 3. I think all 3 work really, really well. But the dialed-in bobbin is the newest of those, and now this is not something revolutionary. A lot of other companies make theirs. I just like how Loon's Ergo series feels in my hands, and now to have an adjustable tensioner on there is really, really helpful. Now, to be fair, the other ones have adjustable tensioners. You do it simply by bending the arms that hold your thread spool. It's going to happen inevitably as you have different sizes of spools because they're not necessarily standardized among fly tying companies. But it's nice to be able to do it kind of on the fly with a little turn and spin there, and you can even adjust it without compromising the materials of the tool itself. But I'll put a link to those over at the show notes again, and you can find that over at castingacross.com. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. Please subscribe to your favorite podcast app and rate the podcast in iTunes and Spotify. Then head over to castingacross.com for 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.
They got Willa. They got my daughter. I need to find her. Willa!
From acclaimed director Paul Thomas Anderson.
You can save that girl.
Today, experience what is being called the best movie of the year.
This is the end of the line.
Not for you.
Leonardo DiCaprio, Sean Penn, Benicio del Toro, Tiana Taylor, Chase Infinity.
Let's go! Here I
One battle after another. Now playing only in theaters. Experience it in IMAX. Rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent.
You can't hide.
Hit the road for fun and heartwarming fishing adventures with the Real American Road Trip.
I just want to hook up one time. I just need to hook up one time.
Catch the Waypoint Original Series every Tuesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern on the Waypoint TV channel. Waypoint TV, your destination for outdoor entertainment.
I did get a bite. I have gotten a bite. I did feel it.